Hi, and welcome to the Org Dev podcast. This podcast shines a bright light on the intriguing world of organizational development and design. So, we're here to share some of the concepts, the strategies, and stories that make up this dynamic field. So, organization development, or OD as it's known, is a discipline that has the power to transform organizations, to shape cultures, and to empower the individuals that work in them as well. Yet, what we do as practitioners is often shrouded in mystery. But don't worry, because on this podcast, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal the inner workings of organization development, what it is, who does it, and how do we do it as well. So we're going to demystify some of the concepts, we're going to explore some of the strategies, and most importantly, we're going to explore the real life experiences of professionals who are driving real and significant change and innovation within their organizations. So whether you're an HR professional who's curious about OD, either you want to start practicing it or start to develop it within your own organization, whether you're a leader looking to find a new way of working with your people, or even if you're a seasoned OD practitioner and you're just looking to build some of the techniques into your practice, then this podcast is for you. To help us achieve these big goals, each week we're joined by a brilliant guest OD practitioner. And this week is no different. We're joined by the brilliant Catrin Vaughn, and Catrin brings with her a rich and diverse background, specializing in organizational design and change management. And this kind of makes her the perfect guest for today's episode. So we're going to be delving into her career journey and learning the insights that she's gained along the way and her perspectives on the ever-evolving landscape within our organizations. So she's got a wealth of experience in the field of OD, organizational design, and strategic workforce planning, and with some of the world's most recognized brands. She's currently the strategic workforce director in the consumer division at the BT Group. So before her time at BT, she also spent 2 years as global organizational effectiveness business partner at Diageo, where she played a pivotal role in driving organizational excellence. She's also worked at KPMG, so basically working as a consultant, and there she honed her expertise as a people transformation manager, specializing in change and organizational development. So we're really delighted she's taken the time to join us and to be so generous with her time as well. Catrin, have I done justice to your job title there and your role?
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Brilliant. So, could you just tell just a little bit about your role? Because the thing about OD and the field is that no two roles are the same, and you also because your role sort of transcends different responsibilities as well. So, if you could just tell us a little bit about your role and what does it involve?
Absolutely. So I guess the main aspect of the role is that I'm the custodian of the EE kind of consumer operating model and shaping the organization that wants to deliver the future strategy. So the capabilities within my area are organization design, as you've mentioned, strategic workforce planning. So looking at the opportunities in the future and how do we shape from what we've got today, as well as HR analytics. So kind of looking at the workforce composition and trying to understand from the analytics perspective, what do we have, what are we working on, and what can we develop, as well as the recruitment arm for us as well. So corporate recruitment. So very much linked into that strategic workforce. What's the capabilities, the people of the future, what the roles are, and linking that through into our recruitment strategy.
Brilliant. And just to give people watching this an idea of the sort of the scale, the consumer division in BT is a big operation. It's incorporated things like EE into its operation as well, hasn't it? So
Yes, yeah,
what
very
what
much so.
what is the size and scale of the things you're leading?
So today we are tri-brand, so EE, BT consumer, so everything that you would think from a BT broadband coming into your house, as well as PlusNet. That's all under the banner for consumer within BT Group. That's around the 20,000 direct labour numbers, and we have varying different sites across the UK. So we have our retail colleagues and all of their estate. We have our customer service colleagues and all of their estate, as well as our corporate functions that are supporting them as well. So very much a UK-centric footprint for us, but yes, quite a large and diverse workforce.
So it's almost like the size of a small provincial town, but spread across the entire country that you're leading.
Indeed.
Okay. And I guess the journey that you've had to get to this point, Obviously, just looking at your sort of previous experience and your undergraduate study was in pharmacology. So I'm
Yes.
really curious. And it's interesting because we do work a lot with people with very different backgrounds, from OD. It could be things like engineering, like pharmacology, social work, all types of things. So what's been your kind of journey into your role?
So I think from a university perspective, yes, I study pharmacology and physiology. So the path for that would be very much research based within molecular biology. I made a choice at that age that there's a certain culture that they use in labs that is of I didn't quite get on with because of the smell. So I decided that that wasn't going to be a future for me. So I took the opportunity at that point to look for graduate schemes. Fortunate to get on the Vodafone graduate scheme at that point. And then when I rolled off, I ended up in HR analytics and kind of grew from there. I think particularly the nature of the scientific degree that I did use a lot of data, a lot of scientific modeling, a lot of software, and therefore I can look at, and particularly looking at it from a structural perspective. These are receptors or cells within your body that you're trying to influence. I do, as an in the position I'm in now, do draw some parallels to that, using data, using insights to actually influence some of these little cells, little pockets of people across the organization.
That's really fascinating, isn't it? The sort of the parallels between the sort of the medical model and
Absolutely.
like how things actually work and the systems in which you're trying to sort of influence and shape as well. I guess what do you enjoy most about your role that you're doing at the moment?
The diversity in it is quite a bit. I'm there to bring in varying forms of evidence, varying forms of experience to problem solve and shape new capabilities for the organization. And that for me is a moment to be creative, but also a moment to think that I'm really driving value and creating a better place for our people to thrive and to grow, and removing barriers to that where possible. So I really enjoy that, but I also enjoy the fact that I'm quite embedded within that business to parachute in to help on certain things, or they'll come and draw me in, because there's things that they just require help on, and particularly, I'm not the subject matter expert in their world; they are, but I'm there to help facilitate and to drive and to bring that best model to light for them to be able to drive, be it through our strategic workforce org design or from a recruitment perspective. I'm there to just problem solve and help them rather than anything else, really.
That's really interesting. And I guess one of the big internal discussions, which is, where do people sit within the organization? Which team do you sit within? Do you sit within sort of the traditional HR or you're actually embedded into the organization itself? Where are you?
Yeah, so I'm within the consumer HR function. We would kind of old terminology be considered a center of excellence or center of expertise within that. So very much my peers are colleague experience and talent and leadership, as well as the HR directors that look after the kind of business day-to-day aspects as well.
Brilliant. And um, there's nothing like a good detailed example to bring it to life for people. And this is probably one of the most difficult questions we're going to ask you today. But what does a typical day or week look like for you?
Excellent question. I think collaboration is absolutely key to delivering any of this. Anything done in isolation, particularly around the decisions that we're trying to drive, won't work and it won't be implementable to the organization. So, I spend a lot of time probably in teams, in meetings, discussing with different stakeholders what is it that they're trying to achieve? What are they trying to solve for? And then the rest of the week is very much centered around design time. So, it's been described to me that we are the brain within that HR function. We're the ones that are thinking, taking the time, getting to know the organization, looking for things, be it you're getting to grips with the data itself, researching and designing solutions, or even scanning externally, looking for further opportunities to disrupt or drive performance. So some of that time is, sat on my own doing that, but a lot of the time is collaborating with different networks to be able to get that disruptive conversation to the diverse perspectives.
I guess one of the eternal questions is people understanding how to use your resource in the right way. How do they consume your services? So do people understand what you do? Is it more like they kind of they may identify like a problem, and then all of a sudden you're brought in to unpack it? Do people actually understand like what you do and how you do it, or are you constantly educating people?
A bit of both, really.
Mm.
I think that it depends on the problem. So, particularly in the world of org design, I think that's very well understood. You know, the different models and the different applications that we have that's used by many different organizations. That is almost system defined as well. So there's some understanding of that role. But what we actually do within that is obviously where the variety comes from. I mean, the different organizations I've worked in have also had different perspectives on it and different ways of working around it. But I think when it comes to some of the other elements of how we knit together org design, strategic workforce planning, and some of the other elements as well, perhaps it's not as well understood, but also we are trying to drive value in a way that is slightly different to maybe the typical HR streams of other channels. So an opaque answer for you.
Yeah, I guess there's often the word that comes out most is it depends.
It does, really does. You know, there's also personality that comes into it a lot. You know, there's skill sets, there's experience. I personally draw a lot on the experiences that I've had and my own network, and that is personal to me. And therefore, my perspective on a problem will be a certain lens. Therefore, you know, bringing in the diversity of other people into that will obviously better the solution. But that does also mean my style is very aligned to me, and my experiences in the organization and who I know and all that kind of stuff and how they've worked with me in the past, things like that will also define our solution. So it does depend, but it also doesn't so much depend on the organization. It also depends on you. But
Mm.
that means that there's so much more fluidity in you finding your style and being able to try different things and you know, improve and constantly build your capability, because this is ever expanding on so many different types of subjects, where it's still the core of the methodology and the ways of doing it and the process of it.
And just to have a bit of a geek fest here, there'll be people that always like, oh, what models are you using? And obviously with org design, there are sort of like there's a number of models out there, aren't there, that people sort of
There
often
are,
apply, and often
yes.
people will draw on a sort of a range of them as well. Are there any sort of particular favourites that you think are just a really good way to either make sense of what is going on around you or to potentially plan like an intervention?
I think my biggest encouragement is to people starting out in this field is to get an understanding of concepts like evidence-based HR.
Mhm.
That understanding that the binary data of your system data does not reflect your organization. It is an input, it's a part of it, but the opinions, the environment, the stakeholders you're engaging with, you know, all of that is actually the surplus data that you'll be able to actually drive these decisions and these elements. Obviously, org design has a lot of things. We're on our strategic workforce planning journey at the moment, trying to thread that line between theory and actual practical delivery, which I'm not sure every organization's quite nailed yet. So we're going to try and do that. But you know, the models are the models, but I would encourage more in that field of getting your head around HR. Looking in might look a certain way, but when you're in it, what you have and what you understand and how things work are an art form. So
Yeah, it's almost like a combination of art and science, isn't it? It's like
it
the
very much
analytics
is.
sort
Yeah.
of gives you a really good data point, but it's those relationships and the things that you take away from them that inform you.
Absolutely. People don't behave the way you want them to. And that's what makes this job the best because you can plan it as much as you want, but they'll do something different. And that's
Mm,
fascinating.
absolutely. And what do you find most challenging about your role?
It can be very difficult sometimes to refocus leadership onto the problems you're trying to solve and the compromise that you have to make in order to do it. At, at no point is any organization, you know, starting out with everything they possibly need to be able to do the next step. You're always going to have to design in that blue sky, design the best you possibly can, and then take the reality check of what's actually implementable here. And that for me is a real struggle of trying to refocus leaders around the art of the possible, absolutely being revolutionary and trying to drive as much as possible with that lens of, but is it even achievable? And therefore, will it make a difference to our people and the roles and the organization that we're working in?
That's really interesting,
It's a
isn't it?
challenge.
Yeah. So are you saying that it's almost like sort of managing the expectations of your managers is just as important as anything? I guess it's because with all organization design, it's about trade-offs, isn't it? There is not,
Absolutely.
there's no such thing as the perfect design, is there?
No, but there's also going into a conversation with that expectation, you won't get the outcome that you want. So there's always that balance of driving for innovation, driving for revolutionary, driving them to the perfect as best they can, and then taking a step back, saying, can we? How can we? What would need to change? And that is the work that is people don't like to do necessarily, but that's where it really comes to life.
I like that kind of sort of painting the positive picture, like what's possible, and then grounding it in reality, and rather than getting it the other way around,
Absolutely. Yeah.
puts extra constraints on the solutions that you come up with as well.
Yeah.
Um, and what kind of impacts have you seen from your efforts? What work are you particularly proud of?
Um, I mean, ultimately, we're here to serve the customers. That's the purpose of our business. And I think those moments where you see someone really thriving or our engagement scores coming out of an area that we've interacted with are better, that for me is a real win moment. Obviously, there's the financial delivery and the impact on the customer, but we are there to look at customer journeys and make them as succinct and as fast flowing through the organization as possible. If that's actually working and we're seeing spikes in NPS and we're seeing spikes in our employee engagement, that's real metrics that I take value in seeing that the efforts we're trying to do to make this the best place to work for both our people and the customers. That for me, yeah, a real moment of joy that comes through from that, but also a real motivation because if we're not achieving that, then we haven't finished yet.
That's a great, isn't it? So you're looking for data and like signals that the work is going well. So people won't necessarily tell you because you've got such a big workforce, but there'll be certain indicators like the NPS score that'll tell you, yeah, we're on track, we're doing well.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess along the way, what have been some of your biggest learnings? And it's not necessarily exclusive just to BT, it could be a time at Diageo or KPMG. What kind of things have you learned along the way?
Um, Even at whatever point in my career, I think the biggest learning I had was that there really is no silly question. And although those demons inside tell you that they really aren't, because your perspective, you're in the room in that discussion being asked to participate. Therefore, your voice is absolutely valid and should be heard. So if you're not getting something, most other people will, or your customers won't, or your employees won't. Therefore, what are you designing for? Definitely bring language back into normal everyday speak. Let's just talk like we would to our friends and our colleagues in a way that makes sense to them as much as it does to us. Again, that for me is a big learning, particularly I think out of my consulting time. But yeah, massive learning with that. And don't be afraid to kind of take the time to reflect and build on what you've just done. If it went well or if it didn't go well, build on it. Take it as in your stride. Don't dwell on it. I think that's another thing for me.
That's really interesting. And you pulled on a good thing there. You've experienced very different cultures and
Yes.
also both sides of the fence as well, professional services and sort of client side as well.
Yeah.
How have you found the difference in culture and how has that impact on the work that you've done?
Yeah. There's no hiding. They're very different, and I think that's understood. I think the biggest difference for me that probably pushed the culture is the pace. So in industry pace feels slower, yet you are achieving more. Yet the consulting pace feels insanely high, but you're laser focused on one thing. And therefore everybody around you is laser focused on that one thing that you're trying to achieve, and then you'll move on to the next thing. And it's very sequential. That camaraderie and that pressure and that kind of oven that creates around that is great, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and it is exhausting. yeah, on the other side of the fence, and from an industry perspective, you are spinning plates constantly. So you have that same work ethic, same work model, but how you trying to achieve things has to be simultaneously. And there's a lot of networking and collaboration that happens in very different ways because of that. And then the culture coming from that is very much around the people you know and how you integrate and how you get to know things, rather than that kind of all pushed together camaraderie aspect. Again, I'm in industry right now, so I clearly like it, but I certainly enjoyed my time at KPMG for sure, because of the polar opposite from starting in industry, going in and coming out again.
Well, I guess that's the wonderful thing about an experience in different sectors. You always take
Yeah,
a good piece of it away from it and implement it into the next place as well, which is why it's always good to sort of have different experiences as well.
absolutely.
You've gone from sort of professional services to alcohol and beverages and large scale
Yes.
consumer to like telecommunication. When you're starting a new role, how important is it to really understand the industry that you're in, or is it's just as important just to understand just the principles of what you're trying to do, and the technical stuff will come?
That's really, really interesting question, actually, because my time in consulting, I wasn't purely tagged to one industry because of the specialism I was in. So there is absolutely, perhaps more than any of the others that I've encountered so far, the boundary between you needing to know the industry and the technicality of, at the time, very much steeped in that analytics and org design. That boundary was way beyond that need, really. So I was being able to work across all industries: public, private, international, small business, aggregate, telecoms, banks. It was everything, because that core of that technical expertise is applicable to everywhere. I think I take that very much in where I'm sat now. The reason why I don't need to be the subject matter expert in each one of these sub processes in whatever part of my organization is because the specialism of our roles in where we sit are universal to any of those. Everybody, employees are universal to all of that scenario. The organization is universal to all of that. So there's so many aspects of it that actually don't need that industry piece. On the other side of that, obviously, there comes a point where you do need to understand the industry and therefore the strategic nature of what you're trying to achieve. So um, there's a point where the discussion around, what do we prioritize and how will this impact our employees and customers, that you need to understand the industry to be able to have a voice, to be able to say, I actually should be this way, or we should prioritize doing this, or this actually has the benefit for this aspect of it. And how to get that information comes from pulling in the right people who are already, the strategy team I work very closely with, to be able to inform our discussions around this, as well as the finance team, to be able to give a reality check onto what we can and can't achieve.
That's really interesting. Yeah, yeah, you kind of preempted one of the questions, which is like, who are the big sort of stakeholder groups that you work with as well? So is your work primarily informed by the strategy, or do you inform the strategy of the organization by sort of informing them on what operational realities like?
Bit of both. I think at the moment we're very much in the they will inform us. We've got very clear strategy and very clear boundaries of what we want to go after. Therefore, we're in a good place for us to kind of go running with that. But the dialogue is two ways and will constantly be, because the strategic planning that needs to happen on their end obviously needs to feed from what's the art of the possible from what we're seeing from the organization and the workforce in particular. So at the moment, probably leaning a little bit one way, but normally it would be quite well balanced.
Interesting. And this podcast, some of the people that are watching this are actually either just at the early stages in their career, or they're just starting to think about organization development or design as a field. Like, what advice would you give someone who's considering a career in this field?
Um, my Be curious. There's a lot out there about this field, and can feel a little overwhelming. But my biggest thing is be curious and seek that development, seek that opportunity. Listening to this is a great example of that. But get to know what's out there and get to know what you like about it, and then run with it from there. The other side of the coin is get to know people data. So that some of my points, that evidence-based HR is a great resource to go after, I think CIPD have loads of stuff on it as well, to try and get your head around this world. Because as I said, looking in, it might look one way, but when you're in it, we are heavily involved with the strategy, the finance team, we're custodians of our own data, and we're also constantly looking to be curious and develop and look for new and triggers to disrupt and things like that. So that it is a mindset shift, but the tools are all out there in the public domain to be able to go after and learn and drive. So I would absolutely recommend doing that. Be curious, stay curious.
Great. Yeah, it's really good advice. And you touched on one of the questions I wanted to ask, which is, you have an organization of 20,000 people with a footprint all over the country. There's lots of things going on, but obviously you have to be accountable for the impact of what you do. And sometimes it's not always attributable to one particular thing that made it all work. How do you measure success in your role?
Have we achieved what we said we would achieve? Is one, absolutely. The success of it, excellent question. The metrics that I mentioned there and some of the ones we use, yeah, they're not directly related to this. Is there a question on our employment survey that says this project, how did it do? No. But because we look at trending data, because we look at forecasting data, because we look at things like attrition and length of service and all of the aspects of kind of an employee's life cycle with us, and our people, there's so many of us, our workforce is so big, we are able to look at triggers of certain populations and be able to hone in and look at if our interventions have made any difference. I think from a success perspective, personally, if I could sit with those leaders and in those refocusing conversations, they already have understood and have learnt and have taken back from where the last time we did this, how we're going to do it differently, that would be a very personal success. We'd be immediately talking very differently to what the normal conversation would be around. So
Brilliant. So you don't necessarily have to have the sort of the corporate resources of BT to be able to assess success and progress. There's lots of different ways of doing it.
yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure there are some dashboards somewhere that I'm on, but for me, the success of it comes from that tangible employee and customer interfaces. So that's what I will obsess over and get the team to rally around.
Brilliant. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you for your time. It's been really, really insightful. I've learned so much about the nature of the work you do, the scale of what you do, and how you do it as well. If anybody has any questions, are they able to just drop you a line on maybe LinkedIn or something like that if they've got
Yes,
any sort of specific
absolutely.
questions?
Happy to. Yeah. More than
Brilliant. I
happy
think
to.
that's one of the really nice things about sort of the organization development design community is we kind of pay it forward, don't we? It's like we get a lot of support as we're starting our careers as well, and there's so much
Absolutely.
wisdom
Yeah.
that's passed on as well. So thank you.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We've got other videos which are available. We've got an interview with an organisation development consultant from the House of Commons that you'll find on the channel. And also the next interview we've got coming up is from the NHS. So again, a really different field, but again, a really interesting application as well. So I just want to say thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for answering all my questions.
Thank you.